Testing, testing. 1 minute to Shaw. Thirty seconds to Shaw. Okay, thank you. We are live on Shaw.
So I would like to welcome everybody back to we are very happy to be here. I want to thank our broadcasting partners for broadcasting. Supporting partners that support on our meeting.
I have a motion by councillors Nero and Hilsinger resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of September 27, 2021 be approved. Under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Shoemaker has declared with respect to agenda item 8.1 69 Old Garden River Road as the proposed purchaser is a client of the law firm.
Any other conflicts with fair counsel?
Then under agenda item 4, a motion by councillors Bruni and Hilsinger resolved that the agenda for October 12, 2021 City Council meeting as presented be approved. That will take us to consent. And we have accepted agenda item 6.11 Simpson Street from consent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 6.6, point of shame. Who do I direct the question to? Is Mr. Lamine on?
That in the council chambers, we have all of the council. Either on staff are to us there in the building, we are respective offices and participating in the meeting virtually. So council Bruni, just ask your question and relevant staff members will come on.
Thank you. I guess the question to Mr. Lamine. Mr. Lamine, on average, there's 19 riders per day, which basically is charged $6 return. So it comes out to $54. What is the cost per day to run the bus regarding wages, insurance, gas, etc.?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, the cost per day is $464 per day.
Okay. So you're asking council to put the $11,000 for the budget for 2022. What's the $11,000 for? Is that just for operating? Is that to cover the losses?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, that will cover the whole cost of the pilot, including wages and fuel and maintenance from running from late June until just after Labor Day next year. So it would be referred to budget. So it's all in cost.
Okay, thank you. I notice here you're going to eliminate the 9:15 a.m. Any consideration regarding just having this on weekends only?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Yes, the pilot runs on weekends and holidays where transit is operating right now. And so the morning time, we only had 18 rides in the pilot. So we felt that it would be better use of resources to have the noon hour and then the return time to operate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Being told that I am not very audible right now, so that. Yeah, so Councilor Schmidt wants to say matter.
Councilor Shoemaker's mic.
Thank you. I didn't have questions on this matter, Mr. Mayor, but I did have comments. I thought that this was a great report and a great outcome. And I appreciate that this pilot program has found ways to improve the service for next year, and look forward to supporting the request for the very little amount of money that they're seeking to have approved at budget time this year. I think that this offers a great service to people who might not otherwise be able to make it out to Point of Shame, which, as we know, is quite a trek. And to be able to do it at such a minimal cost is a huge benefit. So thanks to Mr. Lamming for the report and for the recommendations on improvements to the program. And come budget time, I'll be supporting the $11,000 budget request.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Shoemaker. I agree with you. It's nice to be able to get people out there enjoy that park. It's a great park. Anybody else on 6.6? Okay, Councilor Bruni, do you have any other matters?
Just have one more regarding 6.3, the tabulated voting.
Go ahead, Councilor.
I'm just basically would like someone to explain this to me. How does this tabulated voting work? And I might have a question after that.
Go ahead. So, Madam Clerk, are you going to take this question?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the voting tabulator, you probably would have seen them at a provincial election, where once the ballot has been cast, the ballot goes into like a folder that then gets fed into the tabulator and keeps a running count. At the end of voting day, their memory sticks then brought to, it will be City Hall for the final result. So you're not using the staff to count votes manually that one would traditionally.
Okay. I guess my question is just recently with the federal election, the mail-in ballots. We will be having mail-in ballots for.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we do have the option for people to register for mail-in ballots. It will remain to be seen whether those ones are counted by tabulator or counted by hand, but we have calculated, I believe, 5% of eligible voters that may use the mail-in. Because
we know that there was a delay in the mail-in ballots for the federal election locally, correct? Like there was several days.
I'm not entirely familiar with what their processes were besides the closeness of their vote, but we would have it close at 8 p.m. on voting day.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Shoemaker, and then Councilor Dufour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to Madam Clerk, with respect to the voting tabulators, counting the ballots, the paper ballots are maintained to be able to verify the count if necessary, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Yes, that's correct. That was a significant item that we wanted addressed, that we did not want them to disappear, so that we do have paper in the event that we needed a recount.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Tuchinski, is there a chance that the city will be able to use these tabulators for future elections, not just the one upcoming next year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, this is in fact a lease for this election.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought.
Any other questions on 6.3? Seeing none, that's the extent of your matters, Councilor Bruni.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Shoemaker.
Other matters, thank you.
Any other matters on the consent agenda tonight? Councilor Vezo Allen and then Councilor Dufour.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Anderson. It's 6.7, the Welcome to Sault Ste. Marie campaign.
Mr. Anderson is available to us. Welcome, Mr. Anderson. Go ahead, Councillor Venezuelan.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, my question would be for the $12,500 for local media advertising for November and December 2021. Can you please explain a little more about that ad campaign, please, and the targets?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesno-Allen. When we looked at the local media campaign, so we were looking at a couple of different publications, some digital, some print, and we had the cost broken out by print media over the course of a couple of months. Our initial resolution looked at timing between October and December, but based on us coming back to council mid-October, we felt that it was appropriate to price everything for November, December. When we look at the digital publications, we look at the number of impressions. So that's the number of people that we're able to reach over the course of the 2 months. And when we looked at that, we were looking at roughly $4,500 per month for that cost alone. And once factored in with the print feature, we're up close to $12,000. Now, sorry, just to expand upon that, it was my understanding that we would provide the pricing and then council would determine whether or not they wanted all options or could have the recommendation to look at a variety of different options.
So it would be, the advertising would be targeted to newcomers that are already residing here in Sault Ste. Marie, is that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so when we looked at, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesno-Allen, when we did look at I guess when I assessed the resolution, the primary target here was to make newcomers feel welcome in the Soo. And so when we looked at the digital advertising, we're not able to specifically target those that have just relocated to Sault Ste. Marie. We just don't have enough of that information digitally to target the group. So we would have had to do a slightly larger media purchase in order to encapsulate the entirety of Sault Ste. Marie.
And the advertising would be enticing them to put a sign on their lawn? Like, this is what I'm trying to understand, what the focuses of the advertising. Like, what are we asking or enticing or promoting?
It would be welcoming new residents to Sault Ste. Marie. So it would be thanking them for choosing Sault Ste. Marie or welcoming them to Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay, so my question is, and I appreciate that this was done a quick turnaround. Could we not go to our partners and do this via social media, such as the Local Immigration Partnership, the Career Center New to the Soo, Cano, and other organizations, and do this as a social media welcome rather than, I just don't see the value in spending $12,000 on advertising. That seems, and I understand how much advertising costs and I appreciate it, but was that considered when you were putting forth this plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesno-Allen, we provided the cost breakdown based on the wording of the resolution, which included banner on local media and media advertising. So that's how we came up with the cost estimate. Certainly, based on your recommendation, there are other mediums out there that we could look at, including social media.
So Mr. Anderson, I'm just going to add some clarity here, both for council and maybe for the folks that are watching us at home. This staff report wasn't a report that came back from staff, because this is something that staff is proposing. It came back from staff in response to the resolution that we passed. And it isn't actually recommending the spend of these resources. It's providing you the information in response to the resolution, and we're accepting it for information. If anybody wanted to move forward with this, they would have to, if they wanted to move forward with it immediately, they'd have to put a resolution forward to direct staff to, one, find the money, because it's not budgeted for, and two is to spend the money. That's not before us. The other option is to refer the matter to budget, which would obviously not see us do this in November, December, but see us make a decision on the spend come December.
Yeah.
So based on the nature of the resolution, staff was responding directly to it. This is the report that comes from that. If council wanted staff to move on that, you'd have to give them that direction either tonight or at another meeting subsequent to tonight.
Yeah, I understand that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I just wanted to understand the focus and the rationale of what that advertising was. So I appreciate that, Mr. Anderson. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Anderson on 6.7? Seeing none, do you have anything else, Councilor Venezuela?
I don't.
Councilor Dufour, you had matters?
Just one, Mr. Mayor, just on 6.4, outstanding council resolutions.
Go ahead.
Through you to probably Mr. White. I just noticed there was one resolution on here that had neither a timeline attached to it nor slotted for removal. And that's the one, examine established neighborhoods for future growth. Is there a way we could get a timeline for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, that report is being worked on. There is a draft of it that's
Okay.
being discussed at the staff level right now. So I would expect it would come forward within either 2 weeks or 1 month.
Oh, well, that was a lot faster than I expected. Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else in 6.4? Any other matters on the consent agenda, council? Seeing none?
I will read the motion. Resolved that it's a motion by Councilors Nero and Hilsinger. Resolved that all the items listed under date October 12, 2021, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 6.11 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carried. So that brings us to the accepted matter, which was 6.11.
That's right. And it is, the staff is suggesting an amendment to that motion for clarity, including a specific prohibition of parking on the east side of Simpson Street. So the motion, as staff has suggested be amended, is by Nero and Hilsinger. Resolved that the report of the Manager of Design and Transportation Engineering dated October 12, 2021 concerning on-street parking on Simpson Street be received, and that the current parking prohibitions on the west side of Simpson Street between Queen Street East and Wellington Street East be removed, and all parking on the east side of Simpson Street between Queen Street East and Wellington Street East be prohibited.
Okay. Is clarity on the way that that's been adjusted, council? Yes? Okay, so who asked this be accepted? from
It was
consent?
only accepted because staff was suggesting a motion other than what had appeared on the
Okay.
consent agenda.
Okay, council, do we have any questions on or comments on 6.11? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. That, Madam Clerk, I think brings us to 8.
I'm just waiting for Councillor Dufour's vote on 6.11.
He was in favor.
So under agenda item 8.1, 69 Old Garden River Road, the first motion is a motion by Councillors Bruni and Nero. Resolved that the rules of procedure be suspended to allow for a motion for reconsideration without a notice of motion.
Okay, so before we get into this motion, council, maybe for the benefit of those that are watching and following this matter, I can give some perspective on how we are here today. At the last meeting, we had a matter before us and we called a vote on it. And it appeared to me when I was looking at the computer monitor that I was in front of, that the motion passed, but it was unclear to me who voted in which direction. And I was a bit confused about that. So I had asked the clerk what the recorded vote was. For the benefit of people that follow us at home, we have an e-scribe system. We have an electronic voting system, which is our recorded votes, and those votes are the votes that bind us. And the clerk indicated to me at the time that the recorded vote was 5-5. And we moved on at that point. So it occurred to me afterwards that one thing didn't make sense with respect to the other. And there's an email on the council that, on the council agenda that I had sent to the councilors the next morning. And I had given Councillor Bruni a call because it appeared to me that Councillor Bruni intended on voting in favor of the matter. But when I looked at the recorded votes, his vote was recorded as against. And that was recorded as against in error. So I think we have to acknowledge that Councillor Bruni, when given the opportunity to vote and show a hand, voted in favor. That vote is not actually the binding vote. We do that so people at home can see which way we voted on something. In order to correct the record, we're here today. And when we have a reconsideration, which is the formal way to actually cast our ballots again, you have to wait 2 weeks for that. So the first resolution is to adjust or suspend the rules of our procedure so we could deal with it tonight. And the second resolution is to reconsider. Now, this isn't a usual reconsideration because a usual reconsideration is somebody actually wanting to reconsider the matter and change their vote because not because they voted in error the first time, they wanted to actually vote differently. In this case, Councillor Bruni isn't asking to reconsider his vote because he has had a change of mind. He's asked to consider his vote because his technical vote and his physical vote are inconsistent with one another. That doesn't stop councillors from voting whatever way they feel most appropriate to vote, because once we open up a reconsideration, the matter is before us again. So when we get to that, if we get to that, I will obviously permit council to ask questions if they see fit to ask questions, or to make additional comments if they see fit to make additional comments. And if you do, we can have that discussion. If you don't, we will go through the process of correcting the record and casting the votes. So on the first motion, which is a motion to suspend our rules of procedure so we can deal with this today, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks. Do we have any questions on that motion? Any comments on that motion? So all in favor of that? So that passes. So now we have the reconsideration motion before us.
I'm waiting for Councillor Nero. Affirmative. Thank you. So the second motion is a motion by Councillors Bruni and Nero, resolved that the following resolution of September 27, 2021 be reconsidered. Resolved that bylaw 2021-186, being a bylaw to authorize the sale of surplus property being Civic 69 Old Garden River Road to Rocketta Holdings, Inc., be passed in open council this 27th day of September 2021. So this is the motion for the reconsideration.
Okay, Councillor Bruni, as the mover, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, first of all, I apologize. I did have some technical difficulty regarding the voting that particular night. And Mr. Mayor, you were correct. I did have my hand up in the air that I was in favor of this. And basically, that's my only comment. I mean, I voted in favor of it, so and I will continue to vote in favor.
Councillor Bruni, did you want to speak to it as a seconder of the reconsideration? No, I'm just giving you opportunity before we open it up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And basically, not to repeat what you said, but this reconsideration, I seconded the motion as a courtesy to Councillor Bruni. This is not a change of heart on the way the vote went. If there was a mistake done because of electronic or what have you, I think it's quite different than asking for a reconsideration because somebody had a change of heart in the way they made their decision. So I certainly would support the reconsideration, and therefore I second it to get it on the floor.
Okay, so council, do we have any questions or comments from councillors on the reconsideration motion? Councillor Gardy. You have to wait for your mic, Councillor.
Sorry, I do have one question on the property itself. May I ask that question right now?
Go ahead.
So just to be clear, we received, a number of pieces of correspondence in between this meeting and our last. And one thing that I'm looking for some clarity on, and if it was discussed at the last meeting, forgive me, I neglect to recall, but there are a number of people in the area who are concerned about, and I use their term, a test facility or a test track being located on that site. Now, one is, it's my understanding that that's not in the plans, and if it were, Mr. Mayor, or, would that have to come back to this council for approval? I don't believe it's zoned as such. Could you help me out with that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask the CEO to answer that question. He's got
Thank
a
you.
definitive answer to it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. It's been conveyed to me that an activity like that would require a rezoning of the property, so it would be back before you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. White. And I'm going to ask one further question. Please, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
Through
go
you
ahead.
to whomever you direct it to. In terms of larger vehicles, commercial vehicles coming and going from that property, there wouldn't be any specific parameters in terms of time where that would be prohibited, correct? I'm talking like delivering things.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I'm going to suggest the Director of Planning answer that.
Appreciate it.
Before we get to that, though, Mr. White, I think it's a legitimate question and it can be asked and answered. I think, though, procedurally on the next stage of this, like right now, we're talking about whether it should be reconsidered. We will vote on that.
That's what.
That's
why I
my
prefaced
mistake,
comments
Mr. Mayor.
earlier with,
Yeah.
it was the appropriate time to ask these
Yeah,
questions.
sorry. So we'll just
Thanks.
pause. I'll come back to you once we vote on the reconsideration.
Perfect,
So
thanks.
Once the reconsideration passes, if it passes, then the issues again before. Any other questions on the reconsideration? Councillor Hilsinger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How does reconsideration work if a counselor who was there for the last vote is not here today?
They're simply not here. Their vote isn't cast. So their vote last time as a vote in favor. So you're referring to Councillor Christian, I think, because Councillor Christian isn't here this time. His vote in favor last time doesn't count when it's voted this time. Only
Okay,
those present can vote.
okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the people that are present here today will be the people voting on it. And it has to pass with this group of people
Thank
or
you.
fail with this group of people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on the reconsideration?
No, sir.
Okay, so can we have a vote on the reconsideration? All in favor of the reconsideration then? Opposed to the reconsideration? The reconsideration passes by my count 7-2, Madam Clerk, is that correct?
I have 6-2.
Oh, Councillor Hollingsworth's not with us. I understand Councillor Hollingsworth might be trying to enter the meeting by Zoom, Madam Clerk.
I believe that she is trying to.
Okay, and I'll leave that with you, and if she's successful in that respect, you'll allow her into the meeting and she can participate that
That's
way.
correct.
Okay, so now the matter is before us again. The reconsideration is passed 6-2, the matter is before us, and the matter is open to be discussed again if need be. Councillor Gardy was asking questions about it, so I'll start with you, Councillor Gardy. And your last question, the CAO directed to the Director of Planning, so
If you'd like me to repeat it, let me know.
we'll ask him if he needs the question to be repeated. Councillor Hollingsworth is now in the meeting.
Yes, she is.
Where will I be able to see her? Oh, there we go. Okay. Welcome, Councillor Hollingsworth. Mr. CEO, who are we waiting for from staff? So do we have, Madam Deputy Clerk, it might take that to say we have nobody from planning available to us right now?
There
Mr.
is nobody
Mayor,
from
you want to
planning.
move on to another question? I'll go.
Okay. So the CEO will determine what is happening in that respect. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Gardy?
I think I'm going to reserve any questions I have further for when there's the appropriate staff on hand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors with respect to the matter? Councillor Nero? Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to repeat everything I said the last meeting, but I am probably going to touch on some of the things. And the first one is that I certainly did move the reconsideration motion with Councillor Bruni. Like I said, I think we should get this right. But even though I voted on the prevailing side last time, which was to not sell the property, but I originally supported the sale of the property when we talked about it. We asked staff to bring it back. In general, with any surplus properties that we were looking at, so that council could consider the disposition of the property. And I supported that at first. And when it came back to council, something had changed. I mean, between the time that we gave staff direction that it should come back and to consider it for disposition, to the time that we actually dealt with it in council on during the last meeting, I mean, something very considerate had changed. I mean, we rezoned a piece of property that was abutting this property at 145 Old Garden River Road, and we rezoned that to allow withdrawal management center. And I thought that change was very considerable based on what council was doing to help that situation come along. And from what we heard at that application, that we certainly were in favor of rezoning the property, but we weren't happy, at least that's the impression that I received, that it was only a 20-bed facility, and that we would do and support whatever we had to do to get the numbers of those beds increased. And not knowing how that would play out, I don't know that it was the best move that we could make by giving up a piece of property that abuts that property. You know, and having said that, I do also note that all of the present building for that withdrawal management center is not being used, so that there is a reasonable chance that it could expand within the existing footprint. But stranger things have happened. You know, we didn't think that we were going to get $8 million for the twin bed, and we did get it. So I know that it may be at this point pie in the sky, but I don't think we should put ourselves in a situation with a piece of property that could be that important to us as our contribution to any expansion of this facility. I mean, when we look at municipal contributions, they can be in two ways. We could be either assets that we already have, or they could be in financial contributions. And I think we would be in a very good position to be able to tell Sioux area hospitals, if this ever came to fruition, that they needed more property, that we had a piece of property that's available, and that would be our contribution to that facility. So I'm not making light of the fact that at our last meeting, there was a petition from all the residents in that neighborhood. And I'm not making light of the fact that between last meeting and this meeting, I think council as a whole probably received 9 to 10 emails from residents in that neighborhood, repeating what they had already expressed to us at the first meeting. And that should be a consideration as well. But for the most part, I want to push the consideration that it's an important piece of property in relation to what we did at 145 Old Garden River Road. And I think it's important that we just keep it in our possession at this time. So for that reason, I'm not going to be supporting the bylaw that authorizes the sale of the surplus property, and not to only the people that are named in that bylaw, But to anyone at this time, I think we should just stop the sale and reconsider our positions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments, councils? Councillor Vezzo Allen.
I'm not going to reiterate what Councillor Nero said, but I'm of the same opinion as I was at the last council meeting when this came forth. I think it is a very critical piece for a variety of reasons. Access for some green space potentially for the withdrawal management facility. And as well, I think it's an important piece for us to keep, and I'm not going to support the sale. And I think it's something we need to keep as part of our surplus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vezzo Allen. Councillor Gardy, I think the CEO has a response on those matters. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, the city solicitor has reminded me when it comes in regards to unloading activities and noise, the property owners would be able to utilize the property for those purposes unless it's between the hours of 11 at night and 7 in the morning, according to the noise bylaw.
Thank you for that, Mr. White. I have one more question, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Gardy.
Along what would be the, I guess, southern perimeter of that property that abuts backyards. In terms of the wooded property, the extent of it in terms of its depth, what would you say it would be? Who would be familiar enough with that piece of property to answer that question for me?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I would ask that the Assistant City Solicitor, who's written the report, be put on to answer.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Welcome
Thank you.
Welcome to council, Ms. Borowitz-Semenik.
Thank you.
You hear the question?
I did hear the question. The actual dimensions of the property, I don't have available to me. However, the visual map shows that it does extend from the rear yard of 81 Sharon Crescent all the way through to 131 Sharon Crescent. So we don't have the actual dimensions, the depth of it. However, just to give some sort of perspective, I can at least provide that information for council's sake.
Thanks. I went up and took a look at the piece of property, so I'm a bit familiar. I was just wondering about specifics, if any. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment as well.
Go ahead.
So this opportunity for that we've provided for reconsideration has allowed me the opportunity to reconsider the vote that I cast over the course of the last a couple of weeks. I've been thinking about it. I've spoken to a number of residents. I've listened intently this evening, attentively to Mr. Nero, and I am going to. I've changed my mind, and will be voting as such. I think Mr. Nero has articulated a pretty good sense of how we should proceed with this piece of property. I'm happy to support that position after some deliberation and some further conversations, and just letting everybody know that that's my intent this evening.
Okay. Councillor Bruni, did you have further comment?
Comment, if possible. Do we have the Roketa Holdings on Zoom tonight?
I think there is a lawyer that represents the company that is available to answer questions if you had a question for that lawyer.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple.
We'll just let him in from the waiting room.
Okay.
Is Madam Clerk or Deputy Clerk, is somebody available to answer the questions? So maybe, Councilor Bruni, while we're waiting for you to have an opportunity to ask the questions, I'll just outline my thinking on this and then we can go from there. I continue to support disposing of the property. I think that there were a couple positions that were raised by residents that should be addressed because I think they're really bona fide illegitimate positions. One of them was suggested, a number of residents wrote, and those communications are on the agenda, and had indicated that we shouldn't dispose of it because they did not think we were getting market value for it. And they didn't want to see us make a rash decision or sell it under market value. That was one of the things that I considered when I considered this matter. And I was disappointed that the price came back when we put it to market the way it did. But the reality is we did expose the property to the market. So I think, it's arguable that we did get market value in response for putting that property to the market. So I want to point out to everybody who followed along on this, this wasn't a quick or rash decision. It was a matter that was some time was taken with, and when it was decided to declare the property surplus, property was put to market, and we chose the maximum market value that we could achieve in that case. The reality is that we have other considerations to make as a council, and we're not just simply a seller of property or a buyer of property. We might sell or buy property with specific purposes and reasons. But one of the things is we are the party that has the benefit of the revenues that are accrued when we dispose of property. So when we are holding on to property, we accrue no revenue from that property, and it is a burden that the taxpayers carry. But when we dispose of that property, we accrue revenue from it, and that is a benefit to the taxpayer. So I could take that into consideration in the sale of it. So notwithstanding that the market value is maybe where we were hopeful that the market value would be higher, it was where it was. But if we dispose of the property, we immediately start collecting tax on the property, which is a benefit to our community. We've talked a number of times in this chamber specifically about how we have to do what we can to increase our tax base, to increase assessment, to generate more revenue. And we do, because there's only so much we can do on the spending side. So we have to make an effort when we can to generate revenue. And this was an opportunity in my mind to do that and generate some considerable revenue that would be beneficial to our community at large. I also think that we have a responsibility in the sale of the property and a lot of the decisions we make to as and when we can, support the business community. We don't have a ton of levers at our disposal, but the levers that we do have, we have to use. And I saw this as a case where there was a healthy business with some young entrepreneurs in it. And this was an opportunity to help them grow that business and improve that business. And I thought that was an added benefit. And I also wanted to support that. I understand why the neighbors are concerned about the use of the property. But one of the things that I would point out to everybody, and I think has to be dominant in this council's mind, is that the intended purchasers of the property want to use the property in accord with its current zoning. So whomever bought property in that neighborhood that abuts that property, the use of that property is consistent. The intended use of that property by the buyer is consistent with the zoning of that property. So it does not require a rezoning. So I think it would be really inconsistent for a council to refuse to sell property based on the use of that property, the intended use of that property being consistent with the zoned use of that property. So here we have a business that wants the property. Their intended use of it is consistent with the zoned use of it. And any neighbors in that proximity would have purchased their property or occupied their property, abutting property that is zoned for this use. So the argument that Mr. Councilor Bruni, Councilor Nero raises, which I understand it, and I understand the attraction to it, but I frankly think it's a pretty empty argument. And I say that because, I've been very public about my frustration about our community's inability to get resources to deal with our mental health and addiction struggles. And in 2017, we sought an additional 5 million of capital, operating, and 11 million of capital. And this 4 or 5 some odd years later, we're looking at the recent announcement was, I think, $343,000 to retrofit part of the current building that's there, Councilor. So there is more room in that current building. and there's more room on that site. But to hold the property for the perspective that at some point, at some time, that campus might move out into a larger campus, I think it's too theoretical, in my opinion, for us to make a decision on when we're faced with an alternate decision where we can generate revenue for the taxpayers, we can get a property that is unused into use in accord with its current zoning, and we can help a small business in our community. So it was those reasons why I originally came to the conclusion to support the disposition of the property to the potential proponents. And it's those reasons why I will continue to support it and vote in favor of it tonight. So Councilor Bruni, I think we might have solved the audio issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So just 1 second, Councilor Bruni. Mr. Acton, can you hear us? I think you're on mute, Mr. Acton. If I can get you to.
Can get it up. Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly. Thank you for making yourself available, Mr. Acton. Councilor Bruni has some questions that I'm going to direct to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mr. Acton. I have several questions regarding this purchase. Would you be able to explain to the viewers and to councilors here, how is this business going to be expanding? What are the owners bringing into the business?
They would be expanding by bringing in complementary businesses onto the site, which all operate within the zoning bylaws. They would be adding additional commercial space for businesses which are looking for that type of facility that they can either rent from the Riquettas in their new building in order to carry out their commercial businesses. Those businesses would be complementary to the business that exists there. They would not increase, the timeframes which the businesses currently operate under like the Riquettas, where their technicians are finished at Friday at 4. They're not there on the weekends. So these would be additional commercial spaces for the service sector industry, which are needed in Sault Ste. Marie and which are being looked for accommodation.
Thank you. Would you be able to expand on what type of businesses will be in this facility?
Sure. There would be businesses like businesses that provides heating, electrical, plumbing services, that type of business that have used the facilities or would use the new buildings for the housing of their inventory and for the deployment of the workers which would provide those services to the residents and businesses of Sault Ste. Marie. That's only an example. The discussions which have gone on with potential tenants are confidential. I would not want to put out the names of businesses that are going to and are looking to locate there because we are under some confidentiality provisions with respect to the commercial negotiations which are ongoing. But those are the kinds of businesses that would be there.
Okay. Hours of operation.
Monday to Friday, 9 to 4 p.m. for technical staff. That would be the typical hours of operation like the Riquettas carry on their business.
Okay. And what about noise level? How much would there be? A lot of noise? I guess I believe somebody brought it up regarding a track. Would there be a track installed?
Absolutely not. There's no intention to build a track there whatsoever.
Okay.
And any of the complementary businesses would, number one, be of the same type. They're not working there at night. They don't have machinery out in the yard making noise. they are subject to the noise bylaws of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, and they would certainly not be a disturbance to the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. I just have a comment.
Go ahead, Councilor Bruni. I said my piece.
Okay, thank you. And to the viewers and to our counselors here, obviously I respect how you vote, but as the mayor has mentioned, we've waited so many years to get $360,000 for the withdrawal treatment center. How much longer will we have to wait if we want to expand? Has there been any thought about expanding the current facility to a second floor or 3 floors? We're really concentrating on this one piece of property that we've asked city staff to provide excess land for us to sell off, which helps out our tax base. So I will continue to vote the way I did vote, that I was in favor of staff's recommendation to sell this piece of property. And I hope the present owner of the building where the withdrawal treatment center, if he wants to expand, they can expand vertically to put on a second floor. Thank you.
And for clarity, I agree with your point, Councilor Bruni, but it's a Sault Area Hospital that's the care provider and that would want to have to expand. The Sault Area Hospital's never reached out to us with respect to this land, expressed interest in this land.
I'm not saying for us to expand. I'm talking.
I get that, but so
present.
it wouldn't even be the present property owner of that site's. It wouldn't be that person's decision to expand. It's actually Sault Area Hospital's decision to expand. And how they expand would be Sault Area Hospital's decision. Sault Area Hospital's never made an outreach to this council or this city about having any interest in that piece of property. No. Councilor Bruni, Councilor Dufour.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a few comments myself. I normally don't spend so much time on a zoning file outside of my ward, but this one I've definitely put some time into, having spoken with Mr. Di Tomaso, Mr. Riccata very briefly, and also the Posniaks. I've carefully gone over all of the issues that you've described and that this council has dealt with. And I certainly appreciate Councillor Nero's argument. Very rarely do I ever vote against what is usually normally very sage advice. But in this specific instance, I have decided to continue to support the way I originally voted, which was to sell the property. And there are a few reasons for that. One of the main reasons is that when I look at the current site of where the new detox center will be going, not only is there room in that building, but you could build that building all over again right beside it and still have room left over for parking on that piece of land. And so when I look at the piece of land that the city is looking to dispose of, that piece of land, with respect to what the mayor said about getting market value, the market is really only 2 or 3 bidders, because that's how many pieces of property have access to roads around this property that we're looking to sell. So, for any future development to occur, I would put to my fellow councilors, it ought to really occur from either the Sault Star property or from the Rocketta's property. And with the bids that we saw in front of us, the bid that had not only the largest amount of value, but was actually prepared to build something was the Rocketta's build. I tend to like things that are more in hand than theoretical. And if the province and the Sault Area Hospital did want to expand, our sale of this property, I don't believe prevents it. So it's something that I'll continue to support in the hopes that we continue to see businesses expand and develop in Sault Ste. Marie in appropriate ways. And, I've shared this with all of the people that I've spoken to, and hope to see that moving forward, whatever council's decision is, that folks will continue to direct their concerns properly to our building and bylaw inspectors to ensure that all businesses, not just the Rocketta's, are abiding by the bylaws that we all expect folks to abide by in Sault Ste. Marie. That's all. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Dufour. Any other comments from any councillors about this matter?
Mr. Mayor, it's
Go ahead,
Councilor
Ca-
Hollingsworth.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I just want to ask a few clarification questions. The first one is to Mr. McConnell.
So we're going to have the CAO take your question. He'll direct it somewhere else if he sees fit. Go ahead.
Okay. We as a community have always been concerned about green space. We are also very concerned about making sure that our large plan for the community includes a lot of community spirit and public areas. So my first question is that this particular area up in this particular area, to your knowledge, Mr. White, do you have a plan? Does the city really have a plan on how to build community up in this area? For example, we are focusing on the downtown with the plaza as one example. Has there been any discussion on how to create a community up in this area for the residents? Has there been any discussion about a park? Is there any short-term, long-term plans, discussions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. To my knowledge, this piece of property has not been identified as proposed parkland, and I would reference the Parks Master Plan that was before council a couple of years ago.
Okay, so hypothetically, if we do decide to sell this property, it sounds like, according to you, Mr. White, that we're not jeopardizing any short or long-term plans. Is that my understanding?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, that's why the matter has been brought forward to you.
Okay. The other question for you, Mr. White, is currently there are some snowmobile trails, I believe, that go from Strathclyde Park up towards some of our hotels. Does any of the snowmobile trails currently go close to this particular piece of property that could benefit the business that's interested in buying this piece of property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I will see if we can refer this question to Mr. Anderson, who I know has been working on the snowmobile trail project.
Thank you.
So if I understand the question, Councillor Hollingsworth, you're asking if there are any current trails that go near this property?
Right, currently, correct, because it could benefit hypothetically this particular business since they're in this type of specialty. And it could impact our future winter tourism.
Mr. Anderson, are you available to us? He is not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I can answer that the linking of the snowmobile trail from the Strathclyde Park staging area up second line and up the hill was the topic of internal discussion with both city staff and city police. And I don't believe a resolution was found this year. I think they're still working on how that would work.
Okay, so it could be a conclusion that potentially expanding this business or helping this business could impact a positive piece on our winter tourism, potentially. That's why I'm asking these questions. Another question, but this is for Mr. Acton.
You go ahead, Mr. Acton is still with us as I understand it. Go ahead, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Mr. Acton, I know that your client is very pro-community. And so my question is, speaking with the owner, I believe he may not be using the entire piece of property if he is successful, that he may want to create a tree buffer. Was there a discussion about that? Can you elaborate on that?
Madam Deputy Clerk, do you have Mr. Acton? So he might not be watching right now.
Okay.
So if you have a question, Councillor Hollingsworth, for staff, we'll take that. We'll certainly welcome you to
I
make
guess
comments.
I guess the bottom line is, would the, if this is sold to the business owner, would he be interested in keeping a tree line buffer between the residents and his business, and not build right up to the edge of the property line, but maybe have at least a 10 to 20 foot buffer? Would he be interested in that?
Whatever the proponent does with the property will have to comply with our bylaws. And it's quite unlikely that the bylaws would permit somebody building up to the edge of the property in those circumstances. But I would defer to staff in that respect.
Okay, that's all the questions. I just commenting that this potential business could have a positive impact on our winter tourism, which we are trying to build as a community. And there are many other green spaces in the area that are part of Sioux College. And right now, it sounds like the city has not started to look at building community up in this area. So having said that, supporting a small business is always a positive, and definitely supporting winter activities, bringing tourism is also positive. So right now I'm looking at supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, council, do we have any other comments on this matter? Do we have any other questions on the matter? Okay, so you have your e-scribe in front of you, but for the purposes of the folks that are watching, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. All in favor of the bylaw? We have Councillor Scott, Councillor Dufour, myself, Councillor Bruni, and Councillor Hollingsworth. That is 5. All opposed to the bylaw. Councillor Nero, Councillor Gardy, Councillor Vezowan, Councillor Hilsinger. The bylaw passes by my count. Madam Clerk, what does your e-scribe count say?
It passes by a vote of 5 to 4.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, council. That brings us to bylaws.
And Councillor Hollingsworth, you weren't present when we had the declarations of pecuniary interest, but I believe you had declared with respect to property owned by the Fremlins that the zoning bylaws 198 and 199, I'm assuming I'll
11.1.7. I think she had previously declared on that, correct?
September
correct.
27. Yeah.
That's correct.
So
Okay.
we'll separate that out.
Just give me a second to
No problem.
So I have the consent motion by Councillors Nero and Hilsinger, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date October 12, 2021, save and accept bylaws 2021-198 and 2021-199 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried.
And I'm just casting 2021-198. And that is a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hilsinger, resolved that bylaw 2021-198 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 255 East Balfour Street, Fremlin, be passed in open council this 12th day of October 2021.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And bylaw 2021-199, a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hilsinger. Resolved that bylaw 2021-199 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 306 River Road be passed in open council this 12th day of October 2021.
All in favor?
That will bring us to a motion by Councillors Nero and Shoemaker that this council now adjourn.
So we'll have Counselor Gardy. All in favor? Motion carried. Very happy to see you all again, counselors, and I look forward to our next meeting.